every time it looks like this show is dead, we come back. My apologies, but due to a mixture of work and Fright Fest in September and October are usually write-offs for me. But anyway, welcome back once again, dear listener, to the Horror Cult Films Podcast. I'm David Smith, and joining me, as usual, are Misters Alasdair and Jim Lamming. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Tonight, we return to two franchises we've covered before, Halloween and Hellraiser, with the releases of Halloween Ends and what will no doubt be known as Hellraiser 2022. Before all that, though, let's talk about some of the many movies we've been watching since we last did a full one of these. Jim, I'm going to start off with yourself. What have you been watching?
Well, with Halloween Ends, I decided to fill in the little gaps that I had with the rest of the movies, namely Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, and the one film I've never been able to watch all the way through up to this point, which is Rob Zombie's Halloween 2.
That seems like a pretty brutal double bill, mate. What do you think of these?
Well, luckily I didn't watch them on the same day because I don't think I would have been able to cope. But yeah, Rob Zombie's... I remember the point where I kept losing it, and that is where it turns out that whole hospital scene was just a dream. Or a nightmare, I suppose. And it is nasty, no redeeming qualities about it, and there was nothing scary about it. It just went for straight up unpleasantries. And then all of that was a dream. And prior to that, you had all that bullshit with the white horse and all that. But I thought, right, I'm going to stick with it because it might improve. It did slightly. And bearing in mind this film was made in 2009, it couldn't have looked any more Y2K if it tried. I thought I was watching maybe, I don't know, Urban Legend or something from that era. Like just the costumes, the characters all felt 10 years out of date watching this.
They all kind of look like for Rob Zombie fans. Like that's the aesthetic he's gone for. It's the same aesthetic he performs with.
Yeah, and although it's not, credit to him as a director in terms of establishing shots, just visualization, that sort of thing, it was quite good. There's some really, really nice visuals in there. But the film was just absolutely miserable, nasty rubbish. And it just didn't get any better from, where I kept dropping off before. It just nasty scene after nasty scene. Characters being miserable. And I know it's a film about killing, and all of these films are about killing, but 99% of slasher movies are a little, play it for laughs, bit silly, never too serious, but this was just a fucking miserable experience from start to end, and I was so glad when it finished. As an aside, it felt like Dr. Loomis was a little side sketch. It felt like there was no point to his character being in this film whatsoever, apart from, to die in a blaze of glory at the end.
Oh, yeah, he's a personality transplant since the first. He's just an absolute dick in this one.
It's just the whole running time was just a miserable experience. And, I thought I might regret turning it off where I did before and not being able to stick with it, but I don't. In fact, I commend myself back then for turning it off and not wasting my time. That was my Halloween night movie of choice this year. And yeah, I've got Netflix, I've got Sky, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, got access to all of those. I could have watched anything on any of those, and I watched that. But it didn't get any better because on Paramount Plus they've got Halloween 6, just that one, none of the other films.
Oh shit, that's weird.
So I thought, you know what, it's not on anything else, so I'll finally give it a try. And when certain films get, they get torn into, they're terrible, they're rubbish, no redeeming features for it whatsoever, and you watch it and you think, you know what, that was actually quite fun, regardless of how badly it was made and how terrible the performances are. Unfortunately, this wasn't one of those films. It was as bad as everyone says. Even Paul Rudd couldn't save this film. It's absolutely shocking.
I forgot he was in these. That was going back a ways.
Yeah, I think it was his first film role, actually.
Yeah, I think it was. I guess we're all going to go on to her later on if Halloween Ends was worse. We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Halloween 6, without commenting on Halloween Ends. Pretend Halloween Ends doesn't exist. I'm not saying about to bias people one way or the other. But Halloween 6, I think, is the worst in the franchise. Possibly until now. We'll find out in probably about an hour's time.
I've got to agree with that. It's abysmal. There's no redeeming qualities about that whatsoever. It did start off like with that nice 90s vibe, that sort of early to mid 90s look to it, and you thought, oh yeah, it could be going somewhere with this, but it soon falls off and just falls flat on its face. Yeah, doesn't pick up any point from the. But moving on to something better. I watched X, Ty West's slasher set in the late 70s.
That's a good one.
It was good. I was probably expecting a bit more from it, given how much hype it got when it first released. So I think I'd already set myself an unrealistic standard for it before I'd even watched it. It's basically an homage to old slashers, I guess. I mean, there's nothing more you can say about it. It's full of TNA, lots of shagging throughout, and a pretty fun kill list on there. It's a decent enough film. I had a good time. Maybe it suffers from the same problem that the films it's homaging does, in that it's probably a bit too long, but it's still a bit of fun. After that, I've been watching a few episodes of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Very, very much reminds me of, when the X-Files was at its peak in the 90s, you'd get lots of TV shows such as The Outer Limits, Tales from the Dark Side, those sort of anthology shows. Every episode was a different twisted tale. It very much reminds me of that. And there's a new villain in each episode, different situations, lots of great actors in there. There's F. Murray Abraham was in one of them. I think Andrew Lincoln's in one coming up that I've yet to see. The first 3 episodes which I've watched are all great, but the one that affected me most, I think, was episode 2. I forget the title, but it's set in a graveyard in Salem, probably around the 18th, 19th century. The main character's a grave robber, but all his marks are getting stolen by rats, and no one believes him. So he decides to take it upon himself and sort this problem out. And he basically gets caught up in this series of tunnels underground, and it is so claustrophobic. I was uncomfortable throughout that entire episode. It was horrible.
Is this like a Del Toro Presents, where it's like a different director every time?
There's different directors, and each episode, the main character of that episode comes up against a monster, basically. I don't want to spoil it because it's relatively new, and it's very, very good, very well shot. Del Toro presents each episode at the beginning, gives it a little monologue before it starts. And it's just very well made, very well put together, and some really, really good horror, basically. Sure. And I'm going to finish off slightly off topic, but I've been watching Andor, the latest Star Wars TV show.
Oh, how are you feeling about this?
It's probably one of the best TV shows I've watched in a long time. I don't know why it's taken them so long, but they've basically done away with all references, lore, Easter eggs, and just written a good TV show.
That's unusual.
Yeah. It's basically an espionage thriller. It's got a kind of Cold War Iron Curtain vibe to it.
Right. What's the setting for this one? Was it pre, post, or during the original trilogy?
It's between, so somewhere between Revenge of the Sith, and I think it's quite near towards A New Hope, because obviously this is a spin-off of Rogue One.
Okay.
And spoilers, that's where Andor meets his demise as they steal the Death Star plans. But it's basically how he gets involved with the Rebel Alliance, and gone is the fluff, the light-hearted side of Star Wars, and we've actually got a real spy thriller where there are high stakes. Even being associated with the rebels will have you disappear. So from the get-go, the the stakes are massive, and you can really feel it in the writing. The characters are all fantastic. You've got some real assholes in there, as well as some great characters you want to root for. And obviously the Empire, obviously the stoic Brits, they always are, but there's a real nastiness to them in this as well. And I hate to say it's adult, because, Star Wars is a thing that should be enjoyed by everyone, but there's definitely more of a mature vibe to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't pander to the audience for a start, and that's a relief.
Yeah, I'll bet.
After the last few years, it's nice to watch a new Star Wars that doesn't have all those Easter eggs references, silly little lines of dialogue that call back to everything else. It's just its own thing, a really well-written, tight story. Bit of a slow burner. Some people may find it a bit slow going the first few episodes, but I was gripped from the start.
I've heard people talk about the political commentary, and it's very much about the contemporary context. And I've seen it's been getting a lot of very good reviews, but at the same time, as far as I know, its viewing figures haven't been what some of the other shows have been. But I expect that's partially because it isn't doing this, remember Obi-Wan Kenobi, or remember Darth Vader kind of thing. It's not got the same star power. And for me, that's a good thing. That makes me want to watch this show far more than the previous ones.
I think you've sold this to me as well.
I mean, it could quite easily have had CGI Peter Cushing in there. A little nod to R2-D2 and C-3PO, but they've just not done that. It's its own thing. These characters are their own. We've got their own stories. We don't need references, CGI, cameos, or anything like that to drive the story. The only thing that really keeps it Star Wars is the fact that you've got Cassian Andor, who was in Rogue One, spaceships and blasters. There's no lightsaber twirling or anything.
Just to touch on your point there, I always thought that the galaxy that Star Wars had set in is a very large setting, yet the franchise always seems to hinge around the same 4 to 6 people.
It's just one fucking family and lots of desert planets.
And I think the series is finished now, but there's not a sniff of Tatooine on this as well. So.
Excellent. I mean, it's probably coming along at a good time for them as well, because we're looking at a time when I think a lot of people are getting a bit of Star Wars fatigue. There's been so many shows.
This is the perfect antidote for that. I mean, if you were fed up by Rise of Skywalker, you will probably enjoy this. As I say, it's a much more grown-up story. It's no one playing in the toy box. It's just a great written show.
Excellent. And Alasdair, what about yourself? What have you been watching lately, sir?
Well, I've recently seen the film Terrifier 2.
What do you think of this one?
It's an interesting film. It's perhaps one of the goriest films I've ever seen. I could tell from the beginning that it was picking up immediately from where the first film left off. And that left me thinking I should probably have seen the first film first so I could watch these in order. I can tell that Art the Clown is some sort of supernatural entity, and he starts the film missing an eye, and then he has 2 eyes for most of the film.
Yes.
I think he's another sort of creature of Halloween that shows up in Halloween and causes mayhem and carnage. I think he is a silent killer. He doesn't say anything like Mike Myers or Jason Voorhees, but he's a bit more expressive. He's a clown, but he's got sort of mime attributes. There's a lot of black and white color scheme with him. He has horrible teeth, and he has crazy eyes. And he's getting all the blood washed off his clothes. He goes to a laundromat that's during the night and encounters a young girl who's looks similar outfit to him, wide, crazy eyes. And I'm like, that's another one of his species or whatever this is. And they team up and cause carnage and mayhem together. Although I will say it's been my observation that her abilities differ from Art the Clown's. And I'm not actually too sure what that character's name is. But they both just ruin a lot of lives for their own amusement.
Oh, it's such a lot of great kill scenes they have. When I saw we were making this movie 2.5 hours long, right? I was almost watching it for banter going, 2.5 hour slasher? This is going to be shite, because they showed it at Fright Fest. So I stuck around at that screen. But I tell you what, not only does the time just fly by, the kills in this are just about the most violent kills I've ever seen in anything. we're not hugely intense. Like, it's always kind of funny, in a sort of like cover your eyes, like, oh, they didn't sort of way.
Yeah. There's one kill in particular that stands out to me where he's cut some skin off someone's back and then he leaves. And you think the person's dead. The camera goes back. This character is still alive, trying to crawl across the room to get to the phone to call for help. And then Art the Clown returns, and this time he's brought with him salt.
Yeah.
They had some fun with the ideas for creating this. It's kind of like in every episode of South Park when they would kill off Kenny in a different way each time. And in this, it's a similar thing, but with like all the other characters that aren't Art the Clown are being treated like Kenny from South Park.
I love it's now an Oscar contender. It will almost certainly not give a nomination, but I like the idea that people have to sit around in suits watching this film. The thing is, if there's any justice here, it would be nominated for one of the effects ones, like hair and makeup or something along those lines, some sort of technical award. Because you consider the budget they have and just how fucking good these effects look, that is a hell of an achievement it's had, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It's effective. There is parts where you can see where they would have like worked around it. The budget does show in sort of the production levels, but I don't begrudge a film that, because it's not always one of the criteria we're judging films on. Is this entertaining? Is this fun to watch? And for a Splatterfest film, this is it ticks those boxes. It accomplishes what it sets out to do.
Oh, that and some. I mean, I think this improves on the first one in every conceivable way. Like, the characters are more likable than first time around, whilst the kills are kind of bigger. I think they feel a bit more earned. There's a bit more of an emotional impact because we know these people better. And like, even characters that could be tropey, like take the mum, for instance, in this, who just could easily be played as, all right, she's just there as a low-level antagonist just to piss everyone off. But at the same time, I like to kind of go into the sort of stress that she has as a single parent. So they give everyone a bit of context, which for a slasher film, it goes beyond what it needs to do. It does almost make a recurring joke out of how little sense the storyline makes. And towards the end, when some of the turns it takes are just a bit nonsensical. But at the same time, I had such a good time with this one. I absolutely loved that. Yeah. At some point, hey, fuck it. At some point, let's do a Terrifier episode. I've kind of already given away what I thought of both of them. But
I believe they're doing a Terrifier 3 and 4. Or the guy has ideas for a third one, but he believes it'll be so big you'll have to do it in 2 parts. So maybe worth hanging fire.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's 6 hours of Terrifier. And have you watched anything else at all that you want to report on?
At the moment, I've just been quite busy with work, life, and all the rest of it.
And Half-Life and stuff as well, I believe.
That too, yes, on VR. It's been a lot of fun.
I'll tell you guys what I've watched. I mentioned I saw Terrifier 2 at Fright Fest. I'm not going to give everyone here's a list of the 28 films I saw in order for quality, but what I will say is the best ones were Next Exit, an absolutely delightful comedy drama that's coming out soon to the UK. I believe it's already out in the US. Daughter, an ultra-low budget film about, I don't want to give too much away, but I suppose it's about a very unusual family unit that's also got kind of cult vibe. Lola. Lola is a sci-fi film, but was also got some horror elements, has a lot of fun with time travel, and also Stalker. The interview I did with the screenwriter for Stalker, Chris Watts, should be available. It's the episode before this one, or at least it was recorded a few days ago. Should be up by now. And that's the two-hander. Just shows what you can do with just a couple of very strong characters. Oh, and actually, it's more than a two-hander. It's got a cameo from Bret Hitman Hart in it. Does that not sell the film? Elsewhere, did you guys see Smile?
Not yet.
You see it, Jim?
No, I almost went to see it, but I pumped for Halloween Ends instead. So,
well, we'll find out if that's the right choice soon. Smile is surprisingly good for a mainstream studio horror film where the trailer shows far too much. I really had a good time with this one. There's some genuinely unnerving moments. You know, they stage the horror scenes dead well. There's a bit of a shallow mystery. It's one of the frustrating parts of it that they've essentially built up a You know, when like films like The Room and stuff, not The Room, The Ring, where you've got this sort of curse style movie, so it's you have to go back and find the origin of the curse, and it's somewhere in a rural location, right? And Friend requested the same thing. This does that. The problem is the mystery itself that fuels it. It's just kept so abstract and predictable. Like the big confrontation at the end is exactly what you would assume it would be, taking place in the same location you'd assume it takes place in when you're roughly half an hour into the film. And while there's some attempt to do that elevated horror thing of going, it's a metaphor, dummy, at the same time, when you see what the metaphor is, and then the way that they take the plot towards the end, it kind of defeats its own message. Basically, it's a good film despite its problems with the script. And that's down to how well the directors handled the scary scenes. Banshees of Inisherin, which is a reunion for Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson with the director Martin McDonagh. This is a Irish film with the In Bruges crew back together. Very funny. It's about two middle-aged men. One of them decides he doesn't want to be friends with the other any longer, and it's about how this situation just escalates around the village. Very funny. In some places, quite moving, and just very well acted. Oh, and finally, The Innocents. The Innocents is a Norwegian horror film, which is all about some kids that get superpowers and what they do with the superpowers they have. It's really violent in places, one particularly uncomfortable scene involving an animal, but just really, really dark. This isn't like Chronicle or anything along those lines. This is a much darker, much grittier, much smaller, more intimate movie.
I was just about to ask about Chronicle. Yeah.
Chronicle, for the record, is quite good.
Were any animals harmed in the making of that film?
I hope not, although it does look quite realistic. But yeah, so that's what we've been watching. And now let's come to one of our feature presentations. Folks, let's talk about Halloween Ends.
It's been 4 years since Michael Myers vanished without a trace. Hello?
Halloween Ends. It's hard not to admire the boldness of this film. It really does take a risk. I also like that it continues with what Kills started by expanding the scope of the story, making it about Haddonfield rather than Laurie. My compliments are probably going to stop here. But there's some other good things too, but I'll come back to that in a moment. I guess what we're doing is combining elements of Friday the 13th Part 5 and 9 into this 13th Halloween film. Now, Alasdair, what did you make of this one?
13th Halloween film, that's quite a lot. Firstly, about the title, Halloween Ends. I was always quite a big fan of the idea of, you get the Machete films, Machete Kills, and I don't know if they ever got around to making the third planned film, Machete Kills Again. I would quite like this one to have been Halloween Kills Again.
It could be, frankly, Halloween Ends Again, considering we've had multiple times.
It has ended before. Having said that, I mean, we're doing full spoilers, I assume. Like, Mike Myers, he's not coming back to life in this movie's continuity, at least. He's dead. But I don't think it's the last we've ever seen of Mike Myers.
Yeah,
being completely honest.
Give it a few years, it'll be a reboot.
See, if we're looking at Halloween and then Kills and Ends as its own sort of trilogy, or, quadrilogy, if we could include the 1978 original, this film, to me, is... it's not the ending of a trilogy. It's not the ending of a saga. It feels more like a Halloween-adjacent film. Like, because you get this main character who encounters Mike Myers and his life goes off in a different direction. It's kind of like Jim Carrey's character in Me, Myself, and Irene, where he's got one of his characters is getting bullied, but the other personality comes out and then bullies the bullies, essentially. And that seems to be what's happening here with the lead character. And as Mike Myers himself is not the primary antagonist in this film, I just find that a very strange choice for the concluding chapter.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, if this had been a standalone movie, I would have had a lot more time for it. But I also think it fundamentally shows a misunderstanding of the Michael Myers character here, right? Because the film's kind of trying to have its cake and eat it about what's the nature of Myers. So at the beginning, we've got Laurie dehumanizing him. You know, you've got the bit where it's don't let him in, then she changes it to don't let it in. You know, this Myers is a force of evil. Cool. I like that interpretation. However, then we have her saying later, you're just a man. But if this is the case, then does this imply some sort of other original evil that's taken over his body and is now jumping into Corey's? Because we're trying to do two things here. They're both mutually exclusive. We're trying to give this idea that, you know, evil doesn't die, it just changes shape, is the line they say over and over again, or just changes form, whatever. But at the same time, they're also trying to ground Corey's story in something that's very real. They're trying to say, well, you know, he's a monster that was created by the town because they needed a monster, etc. And I think by trying to make Myers into a person and showing, well, humans can do terrible things under terrible pressure, it kind of robs the ending of any particular catharsis, since it means that killing him doesn't have any symbolic value. Rather, it just becomes this quite uncomfortable pro-death penalty message, you know? Like, Corey can't provide an analogue for him, since we see that society is what made Corey vulnerable, but at the same time, that doesn't seem to play a part in Myers up until the very end of this film, where they seem to suggest it did. And then he raises questions about, well, we think about how much he's survived. Like, how can he survive all this gunshot and shit when he's got this evil force in him, but Corey can't? So it's just a bad idea for a movie that's completely out of sync with the very basic rules that this franchise has established until the point. And I would have been okay with that if Corey's character arc wasn't just so botched. Like, I think his motivation in the second half of the film just seemed like a total overreaction. You know, like yeah, it sucks for this kid. He's getting bullied by the Bandcamp nerds and stuff like that. But at the same time, it just didn't seem like anything approaching a proportionate reaction by him. And yeah, maybe it is about the idea that, well, if you're vulnerable, then you can fall into this dark shit. And you can see that with things like, you know, incel groups or whatever. But at the same time here, it just felt like the wrong message for this franchise. Like, if you're going to be doing a sort of story of, all right, this guy takes on an underling here, you know, he takes on an apprentice. It makes sense when Jigsaw does that in every other Saw film, because Jigsaw has like a philosophy. He's got an internal life. He's got, you know, there's something driving him there beyond just anger and rage. If Freddy Krueger had an apprentice, that could make sense as well. Freddy Krueger has a concrete motivation and he's got an internal life. It doesn't really work for Myers. You know, it doesn't make sense to me that Myers didn't just kill Corey on sight. Like I said, we've got this, he looks into his eyes and it's like, oh, I see a kindred spirit. But you don't see a kindred spirit because, you know, you flipped for no fucking reason. And he's just, you know, he's been beaten down by other people.
And what I'd like to say as well about the almost romantic eye contact that they make is that what Mike Myers is seeing there cannot possibly be a kindred spirit, because, okay, I will say that the opening of this film, when the Corey Cunningham character is babysitting, it's a very effective opening. Is you're not immediately aware that this is going to be a shit movie. That it becomes evident later on in the film, but the whole babysitting sequence and Corey's accidental murder of this child and how he feels guilt, like, none of these things, he did not intend it. He feels remorse. And it makes no sense to me why Mike Myers would connect with that.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't quite work. It's like a jigsaw where pieces just are kind of forced into place. And
you're trying to put a square through a triangle.
Yeah.
Wasn't it implied that he knew what he was doing by the end, though, when he was kicking that door in?
No, I didn't care if he knew what he was doing. When did they imply that?
Pretty sure he had a conversation. Oh, it might have been when he confronted Laurie at the end. But I'm pretty sure it was implied that he knew it was his evil side that was kicking that door in, and which then inadvertently knocks a kid over the balcony.
So I would say that the door was blocking his direct line of sight to the kid, so he couldn't have known the kid was on the other side.
I mean, I think we've already established that it's not particularly well
good.
written so far.
I would interpret it that the evil in Corey was perhaps trolling Laurie Strode at that point and just making stuff up to taunt her.
Don't make me watch it a third time to find out. I do think that was a cool opener, though. We've got some nice bits. It's got a good stalk and slash atmosphere. The empty house, possibilities. We're like, oh, is Myers going to suddenly make a comeback coming around from the corner? And we don't get that. Oh, I also like that we have the John Carpenter version of The Things playing on TV, of course, echoing the original.
Yeah, that was
the original Things on. Little bits like that, or Corey going to the fridge, he's going, will I get the beer? No, he goes to the milk instead. What a guy. But, and by the way, as far as the acting goes, Rohan Campbell did a lot with bad material. The material was not worthy of him, I don't think. I think he was genuinely sympathetic and slightly elevated the work, what he had to work with.
Mm-hmm. I might just say as well about when he said about his drinking milk, what a guy, to quote you. That's usually a villain thing to do. Remember Hans Landa drinking milk at the beginning of Inglourious Bastards? And Gary Oldman's character in Leon, he was a milk drinker as well.
Well, so was Leon, actually.
Homelander, need I say more?
Oh, yes, fair enough.
Milk equals evil.
Hey, Jim, we cut you off there. Did you like this film?
Yeah, I did, actually.
But
perhaps, for context, I have watched Halloween 6 and Rob Zombie's sequel recently as well. And comparing the two, this one is well made, if occasionally subdued film that goes in a slightly off-kilter direction. I've seen a lot of people saying it's a terrible passing the torch film, but I wouldn't say that that's the case in this. I kind of saw it as more of a Dracula-Renfield relationship than, a new generation of killer.
I'd agree with that. It doesn't function as a passing the torch film.
No.
I've said we're doing full spoilers here. The Corey Cunningham character stabs himself in the neck. I'll say I was not expecting him to do that when he did do that. That was quite surprising. I was quite bemused, shall we say.
That's got Hellraiser 6 all over it, guys.
It really does. It really does.
He even says, just like how Hellraiser 6 is the bizarre taunt of I'll be in hell where I see you. Whatever the taunt is. This is the same thing with Corey saying, words to the effect of, if I can't have her, no one can, so kills himself as a deterrent. Like, what? I suppose he was relying on the idea that by the timing, she's going to open the door and see her mum over the body and be so angry that she'll never speak to her ma ever again. Although you would wonder why Corey's currently wearing the outfit that he's wearing. But
one, he's dead and can't police that situation. And just to finish the point that I was making is that in order for it to be a passing the baton thing, the Corey Cunningham character, on some level, even if implied, would needed to have survived this film, where he clearly doesn't.
Yeah. Going back to that elaborate plan of his at the end, where he does kill himself, it does initially work until it was foiled by previously Laurie phoning in a suicide at the address, which immediately brings her granddaughter around to the thinking of, it's all right.
She's also seen the radio tower on fire, and she's like, we had an altercation at the radio tower. Like, that radio tower, by the way, was added digitally to Halloween Kills. So that implies there must have been some sort of plan with it. I remember a few months ago on Reddit, people were going, it's maybe the radio tower is controlling Myers or something. In fact, on the interviews promoting it, I believe we're saying the radio tire, the radio tire. What of it? And then, like, you watch and you go, it's just a fucking radio tire.
Just a place where these deadbeat kids hang out.
Yeah, it's what it is.
It's a weird one.
Yes.
In contrast to other Halloween sequels, I can't knock it. Because if you ask me, there hasn't been a good Halloween sequel until this series.
Oh,
the
come
2018.
on. I think Halloween 2, 3, 4, and
Nah,
7 are all quite respectable.
Genuinely good. Not, I enjoy it because it's a slasher and, it's this character. Because Halloween 2 is pretty shit. Come on.
Okay, well, I mean, I think Halloween H2O is the best of an inconsistent bunch.
Which one's the one with Buster Rhymes?
Oh, that's Resurrection.
Yeah, that's the best film in this series. For the audience who might not get my humor, I am being sarcastic. For the record.
Even Halloween 4 is pretty rubbish until we get that great twist third act. I can't say any of the Halloween sequels, even H2O is fine, but I don't think any of them are as good as what we've had since this line of sequels from 2018 onwards.
I just saw there's this new 4K Blu-ray box set that's just come out. It's like Halloween 1996 to 2002. So you get Halloween 6, Halloween H2O, and Halloween Resurrection. And it costs like 50 quid. We're looking at that going, I can't imagine who the target audience for this are. I suppose these are the films that weren't included in the last box set because they only had the first 5, presumably copyright reasons or whatever. Like some sort of complicated lore of who owns what. But yeah, I looked at that and I thought, well, H2O is clearly the standout there. Don't think I paid 50 quid for it. But
I think my issue with, because we're 13 films in, and I think we know there's going to be a 14th eventually, with featuring Mike Myers as the primary antagonist. I think the issue is that there's only so much you can do with a villain that just walks around stabbing people.
Yeah. Which is what I appreciated from this one. It did go in directions I wasn't expecting, and I actually got invested in the characters as well. You could say there's probably too little going on in the first half of the film, but I would say that with the original, we don't see a lot going on other than the beginning and the end. So
I'm going to cautiously agree with you on. And I'm going to contextualize this with, had this been a Halloween adjacent or Halloween Presents style movie, I would find as the ending of like a quadrilogy, that's where your expectations are different. Like you don't change the formula like on the fourth entry in the film. If you want this sort of nuanced story is sort of, if as we were talking about Star Wars earlier, this would be like a Star Wars story, for instance, Rogue One or Solo. It would be a Halloween story. Then that alone would probably eliminate a lot of my issues with it, because I'm not going to hold it to the same standard. But I'm also, whilst the expectations are recalibrated, I think the film would certainly, because there's certainly stuff in there that's interesting. Quick question for both of you, actually. Did Corey Cunningham's weird, creepy mother, did anyone else get Stephen King vibes off of her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a bit of a tonal clash going on there, because she was almost like a kind of cartoon character. I agree, she's got Carrie White's mask sort of written all over her.
Yeah.
I think the tonal shifts was sometimes actually a good thing. I remember at the beginning where we really get to see Jamie Lee Curtis's range. Like, this is the first time since 1978 that we've seen the character of Laurie in a good place emotionally.
Yeah,
she's really quite happy. She's upbeat. She's talking about like showing her tits to grief and stuff like that. And then we've even got those quite nice scenes with the the old guy, the cop from the previous film. And I think it's good to see this sort of life goes on aspect here. It's good to see the character trying something new. But at the same time, when we did get humor in the film, a lot of the time it seemed misjudged. Like the relationship with Corey and both his parents, I thought was a little bit misjudged. I remember when the dad was doing his "I hope you find love" bit, everyone in the cinema started laughing, right? And I think it was supposed to be funny. It's just it came at such an intense part of the narrative.
Yeah, that to me implied that he was basically coasting by this point in his relationship. So that did seem quite an amusing part.
The stepfather was not invested in the marriage. And another, I'm going to call it a tell, is when they arrive at his place of work later on in the movie, in the finale. And he's there, he's in his office, sat in front of a TV. And what time is it? Are we talking like after 9? 10?
Yeah, it's around that time,
like,
isn't it?
You know that he's not there because he loves his work. He's there because he doesn't like his wife.
Yeah, it's like his man cave, you know?
And
but
also...
yeah, you're right, a man cave, yeah.
It also has that great trope moment of is watching a loud action film. I think it was it Hard Target or Hard to Kill, one of those Jean-Claude Van Damme films.
Yeah,
and you've got all those gunshots firing from his loud TV when all the commotion's going on outside with... Is it Michael Myers killing the band camp kids?
But that's you're right, David. That is definitely a man cave. I never thought of it quite like that before. I also love the fact that little detail in the film goes unsaid. It's not spelled out. It's for your astute viewer who just notices, picks up in the home dynamic, and you're there for that reason.
Whilst I didn't like the movie, I don't think it was a lazy film by any means. Like, I think a lot of loving care went into scripting this. And, David Gordon Green's, if nothing else, he's a very skilled visualist. And the film looks pretty impressive. It's well shot. It does. He gives a great Halloween atmosphere. I just sort of thought that, I agree that as just a concluding part of a story, it's way too little, far too late. And considering that we eventually build up to confrontation with Michael and Laurie anyway, that kind of undoes a lot of what's come before. When I first saw the trailer for this, I immediately thought to myself, all right, we're going to get one scene of Michael and Laurie, and the reason being because most of the trailer takes place in one location, right?
Yeah.
But I thought what was going to happen was that they kill Myers in the first 20 minutes, and then you'd have a passing of a torch thing. And in a way, that probably would have been a better approach, so that Myers is right at the forefront, and then you still have this same sort of, well, he's gone, but it doesn't suddenly make everything better. Whereas when we do eventually get the ritualized killing of Myers, the whole town shows up as if it's done this before. And,
Just, guys, place yourselves. Just imagine, for instance, we were all living in the same town, and it had been terrorized back in the 70s, and they got the killer. He's been tied to the roof of the car. We all get the call, so we all drive out to, the skip. They're taking it, and we're just to sort of hang around and watch everyone execute this man without trial. That was certainly an interesting part of the ending.
Myers is just a man. Seems so stupid because you're like, well, yeah, but if he's just a guy, then you don't put him through this fucking machine here.
Nothing survives the industrial shredder.
I can see the lynch mob mentality being a callback to the previous film, and obviously they needed to do some mass physical damage to Myers to put this to bed. But the way they went about it was probably a bit too over the top, considering how... I know we get some daft kills in this, but the whole film is quite understated up to this point, isn't it? So it does seem, again, like a wild tonal shift that harks more back to the previous film's lynch mob mentality. Whereas we've had quiet reflection and closure up to this point.
It's almost operatic what we're doing. And you just said we're going back to the previous film, but the thing with the last film is the last film's message was, see, mobs, pretty bad.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing.
It's completely gone back and forth in its message. There's one actress I'd like to talk about for a second, because she was very good, and she's only really in 2 scenes, 2.5. Right, so it's the mother of the child that dies at the beginning, and she's talking to Corey Cunningham, and then she leaves for her night out. She's off dressed as a flapper. She's having a date night with her husband, and then they come back and they see the son dies, and she has this devastated reaction. And the scene I really liked with her comes later on when she finds Corey drinking at the bar. I was like, oh, look, here you are drinking. And she's talking about her son is still dead. And that you can really see her perspective there. And what I really like about the actress is that her screen time's, 5% of the running time of the movie. Yet she brought her A game to this movie. She really did. And that second scene with her, and she's not gotten over the grief at all. But seeing the killer, however accidental, seeing him have a good time. Bearing in mind, we, the audience, know this is like the first time he's been able to lift the corner of his mouth in any way close to resembling a smile. It comes crashing down as soon as she's there. That was a really, really good and powerful scene that was, I would say, above the rest of this material.
Well, it is only a year or two after the incident anyway, isn't it? So
yeah, still be feeling it, yeah.
Absolutely, and it's probably the catalyst that sends him on this.
Careful how you word that. It's not her fault that he sided with Mike Myers as a choice he made.
Like it's all coincidental, incidental as the scene proceeds, because that's when he leaves. That's when the teen dickheads see him again. Speaking of, I believe the ringleader of those is actually a relative of poor old Ben Tramer. I think he's a descendant of that line, if I read correctly.
That is cool. I mean, he's still alive in this universe, so,
Of course, yes, because that's from Halloween 2, isn't it? When he gets set on fire and shot and everything else.
He gets hit by, because he goes up in flames. He gets run over and they plow straight into like a bus or something. It's a good scene.
Well, at least being set on fire will save on his heating bills.
With that sequence, I was kind of perturbed by the strange thing that the lass who plays Alison was doing for hands. For some reason, she puts them out in front of them, then rubs her palms over her eyes while she's like, ooh. Anyway, it was weird to me. I saw her first and went, what's she up to? On that point, by the way, right, Alison, I think, has been done dirty throughout this trilogy. I don't think that she's ever really had her time to shine as a character. She's acted as a foil for too much of it. Like the first one, she's a foil to her mum, when her mum's got the interesting dynamic with Laurie, and then she's just kind of there as the angel on the shoulder saying, I want to have a relationship with my grandma. And then the second one, she doesn't really do very much. Like, she wants to join the mob in it. But again, the more interesting part is what her mum does, where her mum's originally like, no, you can't, but then succumbs herself. And then in this one, she's still just not really feeling like a proper character. She's there to push the plot in particular directions. But if someone said to me, David, you describe a character of Alison in 5 adjectives, I'd be like, no. And that's a problem, because she should be the kind of heart of this series, because it also is a passing of the torch thing. Just as much, this could be Laurie passing the torch onto her as the lead, but it just never really comes to fruition. I kind of think she's been wasted a little bit.
I love how the answer no. One, that's not an adjective, and that's you're giving one out of you were explicitly asked for 5. You're only giving 1. No. The Alison character, I remember what you said about the hands. I would say it's a setup and payoff that doesn't work, because there's later on in the film, she offers a hand out and he takes her hand in his. And she's offering her hands and he's not taking them. There's something the director had, whatever's going on in his head, he had something in mind. And it just didn't quite translate all that well.
Yeah, because taking a hand bit's kind of undermined by the next bit being, I killed someone, right? He did.
This is an Anakin Skywalker and the women and children too. I killed them all.
I also didn't understand why Alison was so thirsty for Corey. Based upon the evidence that's been put forward that the parents walked back into the house and saw their child fall over the banister where Corey was standing there bloodied up carrying a knife, right? Then it seems improbable that he would not go to jail for this. But also seems improbable this wouldn't end up like an O.J. Simpson situation where everyone kind of knows that he did it, even though he's not been arrested. Like, it didn't work for me that she was going, well, you know, he's a nice guy or whatever. And I just thought his character was sort of played too much like a kind of young adult protagonist, something like Twilight or Bones and All, where he's a kind of dark, brooding, young, handsome guy. But I just didn't really feel like we'd established enough of a kind of connection between the two of them for their relationship to become a tragedy. Because as it goes on, I think we're supposed to want to see them flee Haddonfield and go off together and do their thing. But we don't really have an idea for what her other life could look like. Unlike Laurie, she doesn't really have we haven't established, again, in much of an internal life here. She's reacting to events around her, but we don't really know anything about her. Whereas at least with Laurie, we have this idea that she wants this idyllic family life that she's kind of had to put aside. And because she had to put that aside for so long, trying to get herself ready to fight Myers, then she ended up losing the thing that she wanted all this time because of Myers, right? And it strikes me as what she's trying to get with her granddaughter now is what she wanted with her own kid, but could never have.
Yeah.
And then her writing her book, and I think there's something quite poignant about seeing Laurie's character moving on like that and sort of coming to terms with the possibilities that are just passed her by. You know, what began for her as a series of possibilities is now somewhere in the past, and the very things she was trying to stop from happening already happened. So she's got a clear context. She's got a clear set of aims. She's got a clear backing story. And with Alison, I just didn't really have that. You know, I got, all right, her and Corey are going to leave Haddonfield, and then what?
To me, it kind of just felt like, I'm going to show this town that they're all backwards idiots by giving this guy the time of day. You know, it's sort of a semi-rebellious thing, and it just didn't really do much other than progress his story more than anything, and just drove a wedge between her and Laurie a little bit for a time. But other than that, it just seemed to be more of I wouldn't say a project or anything like that, but it felt like she was trying to prove everyone wrong more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it felt to me that she fancied him because she had to for the story to continue.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a problem with the acting as such. I think both of them are quite good. I guess it's a bit like when you're watching Jurassic World, right? You're going, all right, both actors are quite good, but they have fuck all chemistry together because of the script. Although with Jurassic World, you also get the feeling the two of them don't like each other. Whereas, like here, I think it's just good casting, wrong story for both of them. And yeah, when Myers finally comes in, we've got that little hobbit hole with Myers, and he's like lurking around inside with a sketch of his own face on the wall. Like, I sort of thought at that point, cool, is Myers now going to come out and like, you know, start his spree? But no, we just had to carry on watching those two court.
Yeah.
And actually, here's another thing, right? Myers has taken over Corey's body, right? But we don't know to what extent is this a full-on possession. Because the thing is, Corey still continues to thirst for her. He's still wanting to get a relationship with her. I don't buy that Myers would have any sexual interest whatsoever. So,
No, especially when he's in his 70s at this point.
yeah, like maybe this could have been done like a werewolf movie of Corey trying to fight the Myers side to him, as opposed to just kind of switching between the two personas whenever it suits the plot.
Yeah, there's a bit of flipping about in that, certainly.
When we first happened upon his hobbit hole, as you say, there was that other homeless guy, and at first I thought, you know, he was bringing victims along for, I don't know, is it maybe some sort of ritualistic energy that he feeds from it that makes him stronger, and that's why then Corey takes on the mantle. He starts killing. Does that give Myers more power, but it just really didn't seem to explore that in any way whatsoever.
No, I mean, Myers is meant to have been, presumably there for years recovering from the beating at the end of the second?
Yeah, because that's 2018, was it? That it was supposed to be. And then we're a few years on from that now. So Michael Myers has been living in this hole for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, just tending to his wounds.
Just occasionally being offered up tribute by some homeless guy.
I would have loved it if it'd been like a reference to dogs going missing in the area, so he's got a source of food.
Yeah,
yeah, this is it. When does Mike Myers do his shopping? How does he brush his teeth? What's his game? How does he make this work?
Like, the thing is, it is in canon that he eats dogs because that's in the first film. So you could have just had reference to dogs. Like, we see a bunch of missing animal posters in the park, and like a bucket to catch the rain. Like, that's all he needs.
I was gonna say, like, Mike Myers' corner of the sewers. That would be a great episode of Through the Keyhole.
I like that they do still retain the mystique. Like, although I didn't like the way they deconstructed the character, I did like that we didn't see his face by the end. Although Nick Castle, original Myers, did appear in this. He's the guy flashing in the bar. Good wee cameo.
I think we'll have to talk about the scuffle that the two villains have at some point.
Oh, what, where Corey batters Myers?
Bit silly. He doesn't batter him, they just scuffle. They like grab each other by the shoulders, move
very
about.
much a playground fight, wasn't it?
Yeah, and is that you're just a man in a mask, and then he just nicks his mask. I mean, given that like the baseline crime in the Halloween series is straight up first-degree murder, stealing someone's Halloween mask is quite trivial. And to me, that was actually quite a funny scene, but I don't think the film agrees.
Yeah, it was a funny scene, but it shouldn't have been. I guess maybe what Jim was suggesting about Myers coming back to strength, if maybe that was the intention, but after Myers gets his mask nicked off him, he's like, my mask, and he doesn't kill anyone else before he shows up at Laurie's house, and he's full strength at Laurie's house. I mean, him and Laurie's fight, I liked that it was kind of visceral and quite scrappy, but I didn't like that we didn't really have any stalk and slash to get there. You know, you got the bit where she's pretending to commit suicide, quite humorously, she's wincing to herself before she does it.
Yeah,
despite that she isn't actually about to kill herself, but
that's for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah, for the sake of the twist.
I think that also classes as a fourth wall break, technically.
I will say though that when she is choking her, I did genuinely believe that she could have died at that point. So I thought that was quite tense. And you know what? The other thing that I'm going to compliment this film for is the soundtrack is ace. I also thought that the pumpkins birthing pumpkins image was quite good, and they managed to work it into the film pretty well. So, you know, there were, again, nice aesthetic touches. It's not like you look at this film and go, all right, it was badly made. It wasn't badly made. I think it was just badly written, basically.
Yeah.
And you can only polish a turd so much, you know, and it's, and also another part of the writing, right? So, you know, when the characters start blaming Laurie, in fact, Alison does it, and so does a woman who had the fluorescent light shoved in her in the second one, in the car park. And I just sort of thought, well, within the universe we've established here, Laurie didn't free Myers, so why would anyone be blaming? And it also was established that Myers was not specifically after Laurie either. So it just didn't make any sense. It was kind of forced conflict, like just for the sake of characters shouting at each other. They had to work in this quite ridiculous reason. Maybe it's form underlies meaning, you know, maybe maybe that was the point, they were shouting at her for no reason. But it still felt like it was there as a bit of character drama, but like that she had guilt over it, which...
Yeah, because up until that point, she does seem to be, you know, making strides, and it just seems to me like the film needed to beat her down a little bit for the finale, make it seem like she's got nothing left to lose. But again, it just, as you say, it just seemed forced.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the more natural way of doing that would have just been really burrowing into the grief that she has, that she's lost this daughter who she spent all her life trying to protect.
Yeah, and there's the fact that she's drifting apart from her granddaughter as well. We didn't need outside forces just randomly showing up in the street saying you're a horrible piece of shit and this is your fault. This is all happening.
Yeah. Like, actually, something you said earlier, which actually is what I like about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, is you're right that with Halloween, it's not a very flexible template. If I was in charge of this franchise and I had to write a Halloween Ends equivalent, like something to round it off, I have no idea what a big finale for Halloween would look like. It wouldn't look like this, but I don't know what it would look like. Whereas, in fairness to Rob Zombie, he managed to work very much within a slasher template, but also make something that felt uniquely his.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, this one fundamentally fails as an entry in the series, whereas Zombie's able to still do something that is still Halloween, but is also a pretty fucking weird Halloween film. So I'd say that, and actually, to be fair, we mentioned Star Wars earlier. This is, if anything, maybe this is a bit more like The Last Jedi, because if you go on Twitter, some people absolutely love Halloween Ends. Like, I'm certainly not among them, but some people absolutely swear by this film in a way that, like, when I came out of it, I thought it was infeasible that anyone would actually particularly like it. But at the same time, it was like it definitely has a fan base. It's just not critics, and it's not us, but it does have a fan base. Like, and if The Last Jedi, I think, would be the equivalent. Like, with Last Jedi was liked by critics, but not so much by fans. This, it seems, has more of a fan appeal than it does a critic appeal. But in both cases, they both sort of defy expectations to different levels of success. I say as someone who liked The Last Jedi, but at the same time has sympathy with people that don't. Whereas with this one, I liked that it challenged me. I just thought it challenged me in a really bad way.
Yeah, I mean, it could. I'm not going to dive into it and try and unpick it and everything, but it could be a generational thing. I mean, there's going to be a group of people who these are their first Halloween films that they've seen. And to be fair, it's not a bad series to start off with. And then going back to the older ones, as I have done recently, you know, they've got it quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I would pick 2018 Kills and Ends over parts 4, 5, and 6, the trilogy of 4. And I think this is a more coherent piece of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. But to probably compare this to The Last Jedi, I think that's a bold statement. But I suppose in terms of divisiveness, but in quality, definitely not.
Yeah, definitely not. A couple last things I want to talk about before we do the rating. The sleazy doctor. I thought that was quite funny. I mean, basically,
you
had to have a character that's just a piece of shit because Corey needs to kill them without us completely hating Corey for it. So, you know, here's a sexually exploitative doctor.
Alison's a nurse, and this other woman, their colleague, she doesn't get along with, who gets promoted. The doctor's like, I see you for a minute. Like, what's going on there? And then that scene where both of them are heading back to his place and they're getting ready for date night, you're like, it all makes sense. I will say this as well, is like this film's done a thing of like not telegraphing a lot of its meaning, like a lot of films do. It leaves you to just figure it out as well for yourself. Although this one doesn't need any figuring out at all, unlike the father in his man cave at like 10 at night watching a film because he doesn't want to go home. But just not having that spell, like not being condescending or patronizing to the audience. Like,
it doesn't hold your hand through it, does it?
Yeah, it's the setup and the payoff. And once you go, I see what that is about.
Yeah. And it's handled in a very funny way as well.
Yes.
It brings us to one of the slightly frustrating tributes to the original, you know, where you got pinned to the door of a Myers doing his tilting head thing, which, because this takes place in the same continuity as the original film, I don't think it was necessary. I did like when we got the flashback, and you see the flashbacks to earlier in this trilogy plus the original, because it's a way of reminding you that whilst this new franchise, this new timeline has disowned most of the sequels, as an audience, the significance of this film it is rounding off all 13 of them, right? Like for us, Myers didn't just exist for one night where he stabbed like 3 people and the town can't get over it. Rather, like, we're watching this as a culmination of a 40-year series. And when we get this series of flashbacks and we miss out most of the franchise, I just think it just kind of reminded you that, yeah, they're actually doing something quite admirable here by harking all the way back to 1978. But at the same time, you kind of miss Myers as actually having like had this reign of terror beyond 2 nights up until this point.
Yeah, I think it was just a way of closing things off as like a little nod to everything that's happened and the journey we've all been on as the audience. But even though it does skirt over at best the sequels it disregards, I do feel like I don't know. There's probably a better way of phrasing it, but texturally, there is the other sequels in there. I did get a feeling, a vibe of Halloween 4 and 5 in this, like with the bad boy boyfriend and stuff like that. It did feel like there was some of those, even a bit of Halloween 6. With, I guess, with just how stupid it could be at times. But it did feel like that. And even at the beginning, we had the opening text in the same font as Halloween 3.
Yeah.
Which I guess this is the third, technically the fourth, but the third one in this series. So that was a nice little nod as well.
Yeah, although most of them aren't necessary, I do think seeing all the others does enrich the experience of watching Myers getting his body taken to pieces by a machine. Like, it gives a bit more of this feels bigger than just Myers killed one night in 78, killed one night in 2018, and then came back to kill a sleazy doctor and then got killed himself, which seems a bit less epic. 2 other very quick things. Why is Corey so afraid of the dark at the beginning? That's the catalyst for all of this. The catalyst for all this is those kids on their side and goes, "Let me out," kicks open the door. And also the bar they go into, which Lindsay's in, and I had loved that scene of Laurie and Lindsay speaking again, just because I only found out recently it's the same actor who plays Lindsay in 1978 who plays her in this one and in Halloween Kills. It was just so nice seeing the actors sharing the screen again. But anyway, really bad bar, because you're going, okay, so it's got pool tables and a nightclub. Like, these are 2 things you just don't put together. You got 2 different vibes. Then he try both of them because they're mutually exclusive.
It's also got a photo booth.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in this place.
Neon signs on the wall. Anyway, how many stars are we going to give this one? I'm going to give this one 2 stars. When I first saw it, I thought it was the absolute worst of the franchise. And you know what? I think this is a better film than Halloween 6. I think it's more interesting. It's possibly a better film than Halloween Resurrection as well. Halloween Resurrection is objectively not as well made as this, but it's probably more entertaining. Probably better than Halloween 5. Halloween 5 I didn't like either. So, this is still not a great film, but at least it's a glorious failure to me. It was trying to do something. It took a risk and it didn't pay off, but it did take that risk, and that's important.
I'm going to agree with the 2 stars. I'll say that, like, for a finale for a series of films, and whilst we know that this is just the 3 films, and if we include the original as well, we got your 4 there, but when Laurie Strode and Mike Myers are having their fight at the end and they're doing flashbacks, because of how their continuity is, they're hamstrung. They can only do flashbacks in the previous 2 films and the 1978 original. And you just felt it. You wanted them to do flashbacks to every movie in the series, every entry. They wanted to take the whole franchise, have a flashback of it all, but they couldn't. They were limited. I'd say two stars for this one.
What about you, Jim? You going to go higher than 2, I take it?
You know I am. I couldn't give it a 3. Because, as I say, comparing it to the other sequels, some of which I enjoyed in varying ways, it's better than a lot of them. And I actually enjoyed the film for what it was. I know comparing it to the rest of the series, it is inferior, but I was entertained. So that's 3 stars. Just gotta say the ending was nice. The shots of the empty rooms quite similar to the original. And then we saw that she'd kept the mask on the little table. I thought that was a nice little send off. So
yes, it did seem like there's a lot of care put into it. And I was watching some of the promo interviews. Like for Jamie Lee Curtis, this doesn't just seem like a paycheck. She seems to absolutely live and breathe these new Halloween films. So not to sound like a patronizing arsehole, but basically I'm glad that she's got a send-off that she enjoys, because she did not like part 7 or 8. She's complained about both of them repeatedly. So I'm glad that that's happened. Actually, I should also mention we've not really touched upon the kills at all. The tongue on the vinyl, that was pretty cool. I don't think that the DJ in any way deserved it, but and the killing of the Bandcamp kids, including the nice one who tried to stop things earlier, that was all quite good as well.
They were well staged, and most of them had it coming. So
it's very rare for me to watch a slasher film or some part of an established slasher franchise and feeling bored. And for most parts of this, I did. I just think it was, if I'd warmed to Corey's chemistry with Alison more, if I'd been more emotionally invested in what happened with Corey, and if Corey's motivation made more sense, I think this could have been quite a good film, and just wasn't for me. But they do show us the death card. They say the death card is not all about death; it's also about new beginnings, and perhaps we will have a new franchise beginning. On that point, let's move on to another new reboot. This is Hellraiser 2022.
What is it? It's a puzzle. And it's almost finished. Keep going. So if I solve it, do I get a prize? I do.
Hellraiser 2022. So, Jim, let's get started. How did you feel about this one?
Well, to begin with, I was worried that it was going to be an imitation rather than something new. I'd seen a lot of the news leading up to it. We talked about it on the shows that we did about the previous Hellraiser films. So there was always a concern that it was just going to try and copy Clive Barker's original. But from the outset, we knew that was not the case. I would say after about 10 minutes, I was sold. Great acting, great direction. It looked good. Just in those few buzzwords, it was already better than half of the films we watched last year for this Hellraiser retrospective that we did. And it was. I was engaged by the characters almost immediately. Maybe at times I did feel they felt too sorry for themselves, but the character motivations, the twists, all worked really well in its favor. The Cenobites were fantastic. As I say, it wasn't imitating them; it went in their own direction. And we did have some versions of the original Cenobites, but it did its own thing. It wasn't a copy of what we had before. It was entirely its own film.
Yeah, I want to unpack some of this in a bit about the characters and the Cenobites, but something I want to absolutely agree with you on is, from the first 10 minutes, it was apparent that this was not cheap. There's a big budget. It's observable in this immediate scene. We've got like Joey going into this Voight guy's party. It's kind of feeling a bit out of place. It's all maybe a bit sleazier than he was anticipating. And the party looked impressive. The building looked impressive. The film looked cinematic.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of them have looked cinematic since the third one. So it definitely had that going for it from the very beginning. What do you reckon, Alasdair? Were you a big fan of this one?
Did enjoy this one. I enjoyed it quite a lot. And as I think we all know, I've put up my review for this films on the website, where I gave it 6.5 stars. So I'm not sure what that would translate into the 5-star ratings we're giving here, but I'll certainly try and keep it consistent. It's not without its flaws, but I did really enjoy this film. and I've now seen it 3 times. It takes the franchise further. It's there's a lot of tweaks done to the lore, which to me makes sense. They take every idea that was in the classic series a step further, which I really liked. And the strength of it is really what they're bringing to the table is these new ideas, this sort of monkey paw wish that you can make. And your wishes are quite limited, and it's almost set. And what you actually wish for, you're clearly not told in advance how this is going to play out for you.
Yeah, you get the vibe that you just wouldn't trust the Cenobites in this one.
No, not at all. I love that this is a whole new take on the franchise. It's great. The reference to the god of the labyrinth, Leviathan, has returned and appears again. There's flavors of the original. You know, when the woman takes the box at the very beginning and the man that she meets has that sort of what's your pleasure, sir, sort of vibe to him, and he says it's not to be taken lightly. We the audience, we already know what is in the case. There's a lot going on in this film that I really enjoyed, and it's probably, I think we're right in that it's not as good as the original, but there's a lot to like in this. It's certainly it feels more cinematic than so many of the previous Hellraiser films. I would have loved to have seen this in the cinema.
It's absolutely criminal that it went straight to streaming. If there's one film that I've been looking forward to all year, it's this one, and I would have been there opening night to watch this. But as you say, it's very, very good. I would say it can stand shoulder to shoulder with the original films. 1, 2, or 3. Definitely sits comfortably between 2 and 3 for me. It does explore a lot of themes seen in those ones, and there are parallels to the original as well, where we're getting characters lured into using the lament configuration. Very much shades of Frank and that sort of thing, but with its own unique take on it as well. And while I'm talking about the configuration, I've got to say this is probably the most mechanically satisfying version we've seen of it so far. I know some of it's CGI, but when they use it, it's probably the first time in any of the films it's actually looked like a functional puzzle.
It's still a very easy puzzle, but
yes. Because it wants you to open it. It defies logic and reason in the sense that there's no way that one of these configurations could possibly lead to the other one. But that's I suppose, a fantastical element of it. And as I mentioned this in my review, the box itself, it's now shooting out spines and stabbing people.
It appears that in order for the Cenobites to claim someone, it needs their blood.
Which ties in with, thematically, everything we already know about the Cenobites.
And also Frank's regeneration, as I say, it's got shades of that in it as well. And again, referring back to the original, the score, absolutely fantastic, brilliantly used in this one. I mean, I guess it's a reboot of the franchise, and to steer away from as much of the originals as possible is great, but there's a brilliant choice keeping the original score in there because it worked so well, especially as we're getting towards the finale. That final act is when everything's starting to reveal itself, the hands are being shown. It just works so brilliantly, introducing Leviathan, all worked fantastically with that great score. Probably my favorite horror movie score, I think.
I think a problem that I had with this film is, so David Bruckner has already done 2 horror films, The Ritual and The Night House. Now, like both of them, I think that the character relationships are quite well done. The character motivations were not especially well done. For me, where we're seeing characters behave in ways that are there for narrative convenience, and I'm thinking particularly of the boyfriend and also Nora, Colin and Nora, that's their names, who are basically just there for body count. Now, when we have Trevor giving his reveal of, I've been a villain all this time, because I didn't really have any particular attachment to Trevor, I wasn't surprised and I wasn't very interested by his reveal. Like, I think with him, his character is vague enough. We know he's an asshole on the grounds that he's specifically luring Riley towards trouble that he then takes no ownership for and proceeds to drink around her while she's on the 12-step program. So, we don't have any reason to like the guy. That's fine. Like, characters shouldn't necessarily be likable. But he was also just so vague. Like, when you're watching the original Hellraiser, part of the joy that we have with this is the brothers Larry and Frank. They're both kind of different male archetypes here, but we get an immediate feel for who each of them is. And I think here, Riley's the main character that we get something out of. She's the heart and soul of this film. She's by far the most developed character, and she's the most interesting one. I like that she's frustrating. I like that we see this sort of moment of growth for her when she chucks the pills away, and then we're kind of disappointed when she picks them up seconds later. Like, I think they take her sobriety seriously thematically. We see this girl who's obviously she's felt like a bit of a fuck up all her life and stuff like that, and we get why her brother would be really pissed off at her. We also get why she would hate him as well. She's almost like a wounded animal lashing out. And it felt like they took a lot of care and attention with writing her, but not so much the rest of the cast. So, like the Night House, it just kind of felt like the characters were doing what they needed to do to push the story forward. The Ritual was slightly different in that I genuinely think The Ritual has one of the best on-screen depictions of male friendship with the three guys. For incidental banter is just top-notch. Like, they speak like real people would. But at the same time, when they introduced the sort of the big monster in The Ritual, I wanted to know more about that cult. I wanted to know more about this society they stumble across. And that felt like the same here. I wanted more from the baddies. And it's weird that I say this, despite this film is, I think, 20 minutes longer than it needs to be as well. I wanted more, but I wanted less.
I want to give you a counterpoint, actually. Like, I think, like, the whole magician thing of when you leave the stage, leave them wanting more. I think that's the right thing to do. And I agree, The Ritual left me wanting more. And it's the type of film that, if it had been made in the 70s or 80s, would certainly have had sequels by now. First of all, the creature's still alive. But back to Hellraiser, I would say that from my review, and I'll reiterate this, we spend most of our time in a Hellraiser movie not with the Cenobites. We spend most of the time with the human characters. And you need to have a good cast of human characters to take you through a Hellraiser movie. And it can be done. The original Hellraiser, we have Kirsty, and as a paragon of goodness. Frank is just Frank. Larry's he's a good father, but a doting husband to a woman who just doesn't care about him at all. And Julie is just fantastic. I mean, here's the thing. In most Hellraiser films, Pinhead and the Cenobites are the villains. In the original Hellraiser, Julie is the villain. You see what I mean? That's a strong cast of human characters that carry the entire movie, and then you get the extra icing on the cake, or maybe even a cherry on top, is when the Cenobites turn up. And I think a lot of the Hellraiser sequels rely too heavily on the Cenobites. Even if they try and keep the Cenobites' screen time down to 15 minutes or anything, it doesn't always work what they're trying to do. In this film, the Cenobites were good. I think the human cast needed to be a little bit better. Now, one example I'm going to give is the Nora character, who's part of the group, and I'm completely unclear on whose friend she is. Yeah. And there's also a point, and David and I did discuss this previously. There's a point when she's in the Voight mansion and she finds one of the secret passageways and gets locked inside, and she starts calling for help. It was only at that point that we realized her accent was English. And
Yes.
we're far too deep in the film to realise this should not be new information by now. But she's a nothing character for the whole time. And we think that the only purpose of her character was for that death scene that she's in.
Yeah, which is a good one, to be fair.
Yeah, it is a good one, yeah.
We needed to react to things, and so the Cenobites can kill someone.
In fact, the only characters that have any setup whatsoever are the two main characters. Sorry, my mind's just completely blanked. Trevor and Riley.
Yeah.
They're the only ones that get any real agency, I guess. Everyone else is a vehicle for getting to a point. Like the brother, he's there to serve as the reason for Riley to want to pursue the mystery of the Cenobites, the box. Because if he doesn't go missing, then she doesn't give a crap about it, basically. And yeah, everyone else is just fodder.
For a vehicle character, I still quite like the Matthew character. He's clearly he's frustrated, but he's clearly got a conscience, and he does immediately try, and he comes to her aid. And he's not someone that you would want to have been, taken by the Cenobites. Although when he's in the men's toilets, the public toilets that he's in, and all the walls start shifting, you're like, the end for him.
Those are good moments. Like, even if it's practical CGI, the walls coming apart, moving further, even with the moving van.
Yeah,
it
that
looks
brilliant.
so good.
Oh, see, that was actually why Bruckner was a perfect choice, because this is something we also get in the Ritual. When you've got the grocery store that just sort of shows up periodically in the forest. He's able to use this space really well, and that really did feel like the Clive Barker one, but on a bigger budget, with a bigger scale. In fact, that hospital scene, I reckon, is probably the single most accomplished horror scene in the entire franchise.
Yeah.
But that scene looked spectacular. It was genuinely quite unnerving. And I wouldn't say Hellraiser's an especially horrific... it's a horrific franchise. It's definitely horror. But it doesn't really try and do creepy set pieces all that often. That felt like one, and I liked it. I think, by the way, the new Pinhead, I thought she was brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Jane Clayton, she does that perfect sort of... With the makeup, they've got beautiful but ugly, which is really what Hellraiser's all about. She's still very attractive. She's still very feminine, but she also looks really quite scary.
Yeah, as they've said in the previous films, angels to some, demons to others.
Yeah.
She's really short as well, but at the same time, it doesn't detract from her at all.
No, there's still a towering presence there. Just because of how intimidating the character comes across. And again, it's going... Yeah, absolutely. This is where I guess, innovating rather than imitating, isn't it? Because they could have quite easily just gone for deep English accent again, but they didn't. They went for something a little more of a worldly, haunting. And I think that really worked.
I'd say that what I really like is about the Cenobites, how they've taken them a step further than what they ever were before. So, for instance, with the originals Cenobites, they all had sort of designer wounds, which pale in comparison to these Cenobites. But they're always wearing that sort of like black leather outfits that they had their weapons and tools hanging off of. And in this one, like their skin, that is their outfit.
Yeah, they're basically nude with... parts peeled back and
changed and shifted. But they do have like mechanical. We'll talk about the Voight character at some point. Remember the clockwork operating system he had protruding from his
phenomenal
chest, and it's tearing up his nervous system continually. And that device, like there's one with the gasp. There was like a similar device attached to the gasp.
Yes,
and the Chatterer. We have a new Chatterer. He had some sort of devices sticking out the back of his head, and the Pinhead herself had in her throat, she's got two sort of circular things protruding there. So there's still devices, but they're all gold this time. They're all taken on a new kind of aesthetic and style. But it's certainly very pleasant shift from what we've had in previous films.
You see, when Voight came back into it, I was like, well, no shit, right? I wasn't surprised he was still alive. But once he revealed that thing throughout him, I mean, that was just... Even thinking about it now, like, it looked phenomenal.
That actor really sells the pain that device put him through.
And whereas in the previous films, that person in that situation would have just been added to the army of Cenobites that have come before, he's sort of in a between state of constant torture, where he's no longer human, but not dead. As I say, he really sells it.
It's a great little exchange where he's saying, let me die, and
I was just about to mention that.
They're saying the gift cannot be ungiven. Like, if there's a big theme for this one, it isn't really about sexuality as much this time around, which does take it away from the original a little bit. But rather, this is about hubris. This is about playing with forces bigger than yourself. In fact, because with this one, it's not lust that's motivating the characters here at all. It's a difficult familial relationship and a sense of guilt about her role in her own brother's what appears to be his demise. And I think actually if there's a weakness with the way that Riley's character is handled, I think it's that the script doesn't connect with Cenobites with her enough. Like, to an extent, anyone could have opened that box there. Whereas when we have the original film, what we get with Frank and the relationship we have with Frank and Julia, it's so essential thematically to the rest of the movie. Like, the idea of her bringing him back through stooping to this level of killing a whole bunch of strangers in it, like, that needs to be there. And it's totally in line with the sort of transgressive BDSM iconography we're getting. Whereas here, it's weird that in a more sexually liberated age, the sex is not as much of a part of the film.
Yeah, I thought it was going in that direction first, because after the first scene with Voight trying to summon Leviathan, it then cuts to Riley and Trevor in bed, and you think, well, it is Hellraiser, so I guess we'll expect a bit more of this, and then that's all we see, really. Like, there's like a lot of emphasis is on pleasure and so on in the first few films, whereas it's barely touched upon in this one at all. Maybe it's mentioned by Pinhead when talking to Voight during that ending where he wants rid of that machine in his chest, and it is brushed upon, but never really emphasized or mentioned too much at all. And I think it was with Nora's torture scene as well. They talk about pleasure, but for themselves, not the person they're torturing, where normally it's the other way around.
Yeah, there's like kind of a sadism to it, but we don't really have masochism to it. As far as we have a sex scene at the beginning of the film, and the thing is, sex scenes are for their own sake. It's not like you need one in a movie, right? But at the same time, with the Hellraiser movie, it's part of the film. Yeah. It's part of the DNA of the franchise. It felt weird that was such a fundamental part of the original, and then just wasn't really a part of the motivation here. It wasn't really a part of anything here.
Yeah, this film's it's not as thematically tight as the original movie, but we do have some quite ropey sequels that after watching them you can't even tell what their themes were. So for this one, it has themes. They're there throughout the film. It's just, as I say, it's not as tight and coherent as the original.
To me, the sex scene in the opening felt more of a thing to establish the relationship rather than show that, of the themes of lust, desire, pleasure, that sort of thing as we get in the original films.
I enjoyed the framing of it. So we have the opening sequence of Voight. He turns the cube into the Leviathan configuration in the background. Joy's getting hit by the multiple hooked chains. And by the way, I have to know this. Is his name Joy? Is that a homage to the character from Hellraiser 3, who was also called Joy? Anyway, that's a side thought. But that him getting torn up in the background, Voight summoning Leviathan, we cut to the main title, Hellraiser, and then it's into a sex. Is that sort of framing of violence and sex right next to each other? That's thematic for the series, but not for this film.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, next thing I want to bring up here, because again, I don't want to sound too much like I'm giving us a ripping, because I do genuinely think the story of this was pretty cool. I thought it looked amazing. Again, you've got a nice location with this sort of house full of like Chekhov's doors. You know, the way that it looks like the box itself, like Part 3. And I did think the film had a lot of heart to it with the sibling relationship, even though I didn't think it felt all that Hellraiser. But did you guys think it dragged a little bit? I think for me, where it did drag is, and this is about Cenobites more broadly. The Cenobites are not fast-moving baddies, right? So there's a slowness about the third act, which hasn't always bothered me with the series, but it did here because Voight was having to do a lot of the heavy lifting. The Cenobites were kind of standing around looking intimidating in the background. But at the same time, for me, Voight just wasn't strong enough to fill that gap.
He's this film's version of Frank.
Yeah.
But he makes, like, Frank's there in the opening moments of opening the box, in the opening moments of the original film. And then he's resurrected, I think, in the second act, and he's there. His presence is felt throughout the rest of that original movie. For this film, we have the opening cameo of Voight, and then nothing virtually for Act 1. Completely nothing for Act 1. Like, just shout outs the character's name. He makes a cameo appearance, I would say, in Act 2, where he gets the Nora character stabbed by the box, and then he's finally here in Act 3. I mean, really, when he appears in Act 3, when Trevor's sleeping, and he approaches him and, gives him more instructions, because twist, by the way, that is his employee. Like, that's our actual introduction to the character in the final act of the film. I don't know how this is one of those things. I think he needed to be in the film longer. How you would do that, I don't know.
Yeah, they probably wrote themselves into a corner with that one.
Yeah.
Like, it was a good reveal, but not one that came as any kind of shock. Not that I was expecting it, but when he did come along and it revealed that Trevor was instrumental in setting off the events, it wasn't a surprise. It's like, figures.
I want to say about the Trevor character, there's a section that got me very suspicious about him. And, okay, so they go to the warehouse, they find the cargo container, they break into it, he lets her break the safe, they get the box, and they're back at his place. He has a huge flat, by the way, with a pinball machine. This is one of our unspoken things, because Voight we're told he's stupidly rich. We see his mansion. We can easily believe it. If Trevor's in the employ of Voight, that's how he's affording all of this. So anyway, that was a little detail I quite liked. Another sort of not holding the audience's hand a moment. But she offers the box. She holds her hands out, holds the box towards Trevor, and he's like, "Fuck no, I'm not touching it." And but his reaction's strong, and it gave me the impression, "Oh, you know what this is, don't you?" And that, even though he's got this layer of here's my character, here's my motivations, you think, "Oh, there's something counter to that underneath," and that for me tipped me off.
Yeah, and then there is a part that I guess tries to cover the tracks really with is it Sabrina in the, I assume it's a hospital, where she takes the box for herself, but at that point Trevor is in a different room getting some water conveniently. So him being away from that kind of takes away some of the possibility that he knows what it's about, because he just comes back to her being cut, then basically bailing. So So there is plenty there to make him seem innocent enough. But you're right. I've watched this a couple of times now, and there is a big tell when they are breaking into the safe. So yeah, I think it doesn't matter too much that he was misleading her all along. It's just covers the story a bit.
Or, yeah, it's a setup for. I mean, at least he's better written than Nora.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
She was only there for the kill. That's all.
Yeah.
And we got to know what his accent was a lot earlier in the film as well.
It's the same thing with Colin, where I don't think Colin is the boyfriend. Like,
Yeah.
actually, if this film did break some form of mold in terms of the sexuality of the franchise, is this the first gay couple we've had in the series? Pretty sure it is.
I
would
honestly
say
couldn't
it's
tell you.
probably the first explicitly stated, and not
Yeah.
because usually they might dance around the issue with hints, and perhaps you have to be of the LGBT community to get the tip-offs. But this is explicit. It's not subtextual; it's textual. This is a gay couple there.
That was quite cool in terms of, but at the same time though, where sexuality has previously been explored in these films, it's usually through some form of like excess, which we're not getting there.
Yeah.
Albeit we're not getting there, but it's positive representation in a way that, like, the character of JP in Part 3 is not positive representation of sexuality. That guy's just pure
Very
lust.
much not. Very much not.
Yeah, I've got to say, the effects in this are very good, particularly in the finale where we see Voight, that contraption in his chest collapsing. And he really sells that, by the way. I mean, the amount of times I've been maybe a little too drunk, cuddled over a toilet, I was feeling that.
Yeah. I love once the device is out and the way his body literally stitches itself back. That was very original Frank coming out of the floorboards.
Yeah,
this is very Hellraiser.
Really, it looked like, because in the original you can tell that some of those sequences were filmed backwards because it was melting rather than reconstructing, and it very much had that look to it. Not only that, it looked practical as well. Obviously, some of it was CGI, but it did look like practical effects.
Just want to say about the very original film, a little bit of trivia is that they shot the whole film and it was all done, but because it was $100,000 budget, I don't know what that would be in like inflation from 1987, but that was how much they had to play around with for that film. But the studio liked the film so much they said, we'll go back and film the resurrection sequence, and they got more money for the budget to specifically shoot that sequence. And so of the entire original Hellraiser, Frank's resurrection was filmed last, but you wouldn't know from watching the film, of course. It's a beautiful sequence. And just to go back to the Voight character as well, once the clockwork nerve twister device comes out his head, or what we would call that thing, once it comes out and his body's stitched back together and he has this cathartic laugh, like the pain he was feeling is over, and you're there with him. You feel he's a good actor. He adds a lot of gravitas to this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, as I say, that you really feel that along with him when he's huddled over on the floor, it's collapsing to pieces, and he's just sells it so well, and then immediately gets impaled by a giant.
He gets impaled directly in the part that is just healed. The Cenobites don't fuck around.
Much like the original and some of the sequels, like Part 10, the finale becomes quite a sort of, almost quite a talky finale in some ways, of deals being made and stuff like this, right? But when we last see Voight, how do we interpret this? We interpret that's him being turned into a Cenobite.
Yes. Yeah, I did, yeah.
I like that.
Did as well. Because the eye colour, that changed to match what the Cenobites were, and what happened to his body was different from the, but then every Cenobite's different. There's no, they're almost like snowflakes, but in a dangerous sense. Like there's no two the same.
Yeah.
So he's his own unique Cenobite now.
Yeah, it did. Like it was very in keeping with that aesthetic. The way the skin was peeled back in certain areas.
Yeah.
And finally, the mouth. That was.
After him.
It was very, very good at the same time.
And I like that that was from, he changed his wish from sensation to power. And their idea of power is turning you into a Cenobite. So there's a definite, I would say, disconnect between what we might wish for and what the Cenobites will give you. Because we only find there's six configurations. I'm sure it's like, but there's 6 sides of a cube, for instance. In this film, we only see 3.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, I bet that's why they went with 6. I never even out of my head.
Yeah.
I think you cracked it.
I've solved the puzzle box. So, we see sensation and power and lament, with Riley's character choosing lament. What I like that there's a bittersweet ending to this where Riley does save Colin, but there is that, could she have actually saved her brother? Because they don't demonstrate that power of resurrection. It's talked about a lot. It's probably talked about the most in the entire film, resurrection. Yeah. It's never demonstrated, but we understand Riley's decision because we look at how the Cenobites have handled these other wishes, and they've not gone to plan.
And we do see him in some form a couple of times in the film. Once when she breaks into the mansion and it turns out he's got no skin on his back. Yeah. And then the second time is just before she makes her decision as to what she's getting out of all of this. And he just looks like a shell of a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that obviously sways the decision. But you think, that's the right decision. But then the little speech after that is, well, you've chosen to live with regret for the rest of your life. And it's, that's just harshing the buzz a little bit.
It was totally right, though, because, thematically with her character, she's sort of defined by this idea that everything's being done to her here, right? It's when she's at the beginning, she's being particularly frustrating about her problems, and there's an element of this isn't my fault here. And then, when she's detecting this kind of these bigger forces and nobody believes her at first, it's again about something that's beyond her control. So I like that at the end of this, she's saying, I will live with the guilt here because I can't fix this. This is on me here. And I guess it's, it sucks because the whole thing happened by mistake. But to me, it felt like a good moment of character growth. Yeah, we've got the sort of sometimes dead is better kind of idea to it. And, we know that what she would have got back would not have been the brother that she kind of both loves and hates.
Do we? This is why I think it's a tragedy.
See, I reckon we do. I reckon the implications there that this would be a short-term fix.
I kind of like the ambiguity.
It is good, and it's good the way they reinforce that. Well, it might have been.
It might have gone the way she wanted, where he returns. And it's fine. And they can be brother and sister again, and it's fine. They can just move on with their lives.
But they just have to plant that seed of doubt.
If I was being honest, if they got the brother back, he'd be some sort of Frank-like character where he would need to consume other people's blood in order to maintain his own life force or something to that effect. So it wouldn't have gone right. But I like the fact that it's ambiguous. But room for sequels, because there's 3 wishes that we've not seen demonstrated.
Yeah, it does grow the universe like that. I also think, actually, in terms of, you're right that potentially, say, if there's a 20% chance that it could have worked out. But I like that her not doing that is essentially an act of love. Her not doing that is, if these guys are about as trustworthy as the Saudi prince on the phone asking for money, then I don't want to put him into a position where he's going to be like that fucking guy, like the state the Voight's been. because that could have just corrupted him.
Could have gone Pet Cemetery.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was more of it. If he's been the sort of positive force in her life, I think whatever he did, it would have in some way corrupted that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But by the way, touched on this already, but the actor who played Riley, Odessa Agion, I don't know how you say that, but it's Odessa Agion, I think. She was fantastic. I've also seen her in one of her films. She was in Let's Scare Julie, which was a one-shot horror. Looks a bit like a found footage, but it's not. It's like camera over the shoulder style thing. The characters don't acknowledge the camera, but does follow them in an intimate way. She was very good in that as well. Wasn't exactly a fantastic film, but the first half of it was very watchable. It just got a little bit too typical in the second half. Yes, I thought she was really good, and again, she managed to give the fragility to a character that's really greedy, really unreliable, and just made her quite captivating. If she comes back, I would gladly watch more of her.
But if she didn't, I wouldn't complain. A couple of things, I completely agree with that. A lesser actor could have ruined the whole film. It could have just been bland and uninteresting. But on the flip side of that, I feel these new Cenobites have kind of liberated it. It's not beholden to Pinhead as he was in the previous form. And it's shown that there's a much broader way of dealing with things. And I have to say, after seeing the trailer for this originally, seeing the Leviathan, in my head I was like, oh, is this realizing what Hellraiser 2 tried to do? Because that was brilliant. I thought that film was great, but imagine they had the budget, the resources you have these days to realize that vision of hell. And I was half expecting we were getting that with this one. So imagine they were able to go off and do that as a sequel with these. I would really be interested to see if they could do something along that.
I liked when we saw the kind of Leviathan maze at the side of the mansion at the end. That just looked cool as fuck.
Shows that the house is actually in hell at this point once you've summoned Leviathan. Yeah,
because something that kind of frustrated me about it was the film was obviously not shot in the United States, but it was standing in for the United States. But it meant that the world just felt a little bit characterless. There wasn't really enough exterior shots to give this sort of sense of place about it.
There's only, they establish, like, at the beginning, they're in Serbia, and you get this sort of hammering, thumping music. Like, they establish Serbia quite well, but then beyond Serbia, we get, say, Riley's flat, Trevor's flat, Voight's mansion, and that's it. There's the play,
hospital
the orgy,
as well. But,
the hospital. I was going to say the orgy, the mansion orgy that, although that is actually Voight's mansion. I was going to say where Joey meets his untimely end at the very beginning, but that's it. It's like 4 locations.
Got to say that opening shot there, that there's a pan, the crane pulls up over those buildings in Serbia. That's cracking. That's a very good.
Oh yeah, that felt like saying this is cinema. We have a proper budget, folks.
But it has a way of saying this is the setting for the movie. And I was then expecting the rest of the entire movie to be set in Serbia.
Look, maybe it was trying to hint back to Boater and give us a bit of a scare.
It was an interesting kind of sense of scale, though, because if you're going, okay, well, this is ostensibly taking place in the United States, but here's Serbia as well. Given this is not this isn't small scale. This is like a worldwide tale of good and evil and stuff.
As we get in the first film, because clearly Frank's in some exotic country acquiring the lament configuration. And again, parallels to the first film, we don't really see people getting out and about much in that one. The only time we really see someone out in the streets is when Kirsty is running away from having discovered Frank, and then she passes out in the street. That's pretty much that.
You're forgetting the iconic Liverpool docks.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and at least with the house, we're still getting a nice sense of what the rest of the world, the everyday world around it looks like.
I suppose, there is a couple of outside shot compared to this one. I think we only really see outside the mansion, outside the hospital, and that opening shot in Serbia.
Another very small thing that slightly irked me off, right? So we got at the end when we have this sort of standoff of they need to get the Cenobites in, right? But for them to do that, it required Riley to drop the box. And I didn't like that her dropping the box was something circumstantial. Like, they didn't succeed as a function of a plan that she had. She made the best of a bad situation.
It wasn't the only time they used the falling over trope either. Because prior to that, that's how Colin injured himself the first time. They're running away from the Chatterer and he just stacks it.
Plus, for all the Chatterer, what is everyone's thoughts about the Chatterer?
It's nice to see that character's still got a physical form. I like that he's still a part of the franchise because it's probably the second most iconic character in the entire series. And I think we did him justice there. I'm a Chatterer fan of this.
I was going to say that on a rewatch of Hellraiser, looking at the Chatterer, his teeth, the way the skin's folded over the top of the head, I was getting xenomorph vibes from him.
Definitely.
This is styled like one of the alien creatures. What did do you remember the original two films, obviously? We got the female that had the frame around her neck, her throat was opened up. The reimagining of her, what does everyone think about that?
I think it was a much better version. Definitely a lot more intimidating. Because I guess they've got a lot more to play around with in terms of VFX these days. But yes, it was an intimidating presence in the first film, but this time around felt much more malevolent.
Yeah, they're kind of going for a sort of scary drag queen vibe a little bit in terms of like the skin looking like quite a fantastic outfit.
I would say that the throat cut was much bigger. But I like that. Like, I mean, this is where you go into the sort of the non-canon, the extended media. That the original female Cenobite's backstory was that she was formerly a nun, and I did.
You do get that sort of look from the skin, don't you?
The headdress of a nun, and how this female Cenobite's got that similar stylings around the headdress. Like that's a nun's sort of headdress she's wearing.
Yeah, it was, again, very good designs, far more imaginative than we've seen in most of the sequels. Oh, actually, quick question about the legacy aspect here. I wasn't a fan of them quoting the original when they had like the, such sights to show you, the Explorers line and stuff. They had little callbacks. I thought, well, because we've got a whole new continuity here, I think this is good enough to not need to do that. It's like one of the examples Alistair's brought up in the past is Predator. The Predator franchise has this habit of repeating particular lines, and for me that
every single film.
For me it felt needless this time around.
Yeah, no one would have batted an eyelid if it wasn't there, would they?
No, definitely not. In fact, maybe this Pinhead can even coexist alongside the other Pinhead. Maybe this is the same universe. It's just the line doesn't need to be there.
That's what I was saying in my review, and that there's nothing that discounts it. Like one box could summon in Doug Bradley's Cenobites, and this box, a different box,
absolutely
gets the Jamie Claytons. I mean, Leviathan itself, the common factor of the two franchises, is identical. There's nothing to detract from that too.
Maybe we'll get our crossover, the most ambitious movie of all time.
That I've got to say that scene with Nora where they get her on the chains. And bend her over backwards, and then Pinhead pulls the pin out and puts it through her throat. Just how slowly and meticulously that unfolds is horrifying, but also very, very good.
It was very effective.
I've got a controversial statement to make. Right, the the piano wires that we have in it, better than the chains. That sequence was so to watch. I thought that was magnificent.
What I was going to say is that there's always just been a fan theory of mine, and I've said this in my review, that the the hook chains are always commanded telepathically by Doug Bradley's Pinhead. The other Cenobites didn't seem to have that control over them. And that's true for the whole series. And in this one, it's confirmed every time the chains come, it's Jamie Clayton's Pinhead that's summoning them. But the female Cenobite summons the wires. And would they be more painful? Probably, because when Trevor's being pulled down into the depths of hell, his forearm, it takes all the skin off, and that makes you cringe. That bit.
That's a nice little bit as well. Is it like that sex dungeon or something that Voight's got in his mansion? And I assume that is initially a bed, and then he gets dragged through it, and it turns out it's a huge well or an opening to hell, and it just looks so good.
So depending on how you look at it, this is either the audio promo for Alasdair's review, or Alasdair's review is the poster for this podcast. But I believe you talk about a plot hole in it.
Yeah.
And can we talk about the plot hole here?
Sure. I mean, what I'll say is that they establish a rule is that you get the box, you make 6 sacrifices, you get 6 people to essentially stub their toes on this thing as they're trying to solve it. Then you got an audience with God, and you really won't be able to open this yourself because you need to be alive. You still need to be on the go in order to have an audience with God. And Voight clearly gets that. Like, Joey at the very beginning is the 6th victim, and we get the final Leviathan configuration power. So throughout this film, they're trying to get the Cenobites, really, and Leviathan's dark purposes are trying to get 6 more victims. But both Voight and Riley are granted an audience with God. They're both granted wishes. And I think that we've only had 6 sacrifices. And who of the 2 of them would actually get the... Do you see what I mean?
I suppose technically the Cenobites benefit from Voight's change of heart anyway, because they've just added to their ranks. I mean, it could be that they were just humouring him, and they were going to fuck him over anyway.
Isn't this returning back to a problem we've had since the second entry, which is the role of intentionality and how much that matters to Cenobites, where it either is nothing in the first or it's everything in the second. And because in this case, I guess with Riley, she's not being punished for any sin that she's done in the same way that some of the other characters have been, like in part 5, for instance, and in fact in 6 as well, where the characters are essentially being judged for actions they've taken. When this one, she isn't. She doesn't mean to start any of this. She doesn't know about what this is going to do. She's just in over her head here. A little bit like Voight, actually. But Voight knows what he's doing, but he's also very much in over his head. Voight's almost like John Hammond in Jurassic Park. He's messing with something that he can't tame this.
Yes.
But he thinks he can, but he's
hell finds a way.
Yes,
To cite the original film, Kirsty opens the box. They appear. And she establishes, you've done this before, right? And Pinhead goes, many, many times. And she said, Frank's escaped you. And they don't believe her at first, but then they want proof. They need to see it for their own eyes. But then as soon as Cenobites get Frank, they immediately turn on Kirsty. And I know we're all expecting this. It'd be a fool to trust these guys, but they immediately turn on Kirsty, and she's still got the box, so she sends them back to hell. It's a great finale. And in life, I mean, it's plot hole for this film, for the current Hellraiser 2022. It's a technical plot hole. It's not one that defies the spirit of the Cenobites.
No.
And you're right, they get another Cenobite after losing one of their number. Their numbers are now back up to the same as they were pre-Chatterer. So it makes sense from their perspective to play a little bit fast and loose with their own rules, but the Cenobites won't hold their victims to that same standard.
That's maybe a slightly silly question with the Cenobites, right? But do you reckon the Cenobites are mates? Like, do you reckon, like when one of them dies, do they really give a shit about it? Like, do the Cenobites grieve each other?
I mean, Pinhead was like, the way the Chatterer was dispatched was, it didn't seem like there was any love lost.
No,
but it doesn't mean they don't like each other either.
The Chatterer went willingly as well.
True, he did.
So, it is an odd one. I guess it's more close work colleagues than friends. I get that vibe more than
I like the idea of them going on a staff night out or something. They don't really have to talk about beyond work.
They
or
would
if one of
literally
them,
paint the town red.
If one of them was to get a new job somewhere else, you'd be annoyed for a day, but then you'd forget who they are next week. So,
I've like, do you still keep in touch with Butterball? He's like, nah. we said to make an effort, but he's not texting me. But yeah, because just as you said, like, they lost one of their own, but it's okay. They gained a Cenobite. And I was like, yeah, they probably do just see it in terms of a zero sum like that. Well, easy come, easy go, that sort of thing.
I quite like the number of, because usually all the dialogue for Cenobites is given to Pinhead, and Pinhead had no shortage of dialogue in this film, but one called The Weeper had dialogue. The female Cenobite has dialogue, and so does one that's called The Mask, which is just no head, but just it's a face around that metal frame that you see briefly in a couple scenes. And that was an interesting, that was a really interesting one, that one, because I think that's the one Cenobite that had injuries beyond what human could actually sustain, whereas the others are possibly survivable.
Got the flayed cock on one of them.
Chatterer.
Yeah, that's what you mean. You could survive a flayed cock, but it looked painful.
Your mind went there, but I mean, yeah, I think you could survive that.
It was quite an interesting detail because, like, we don't. It's not like we get a close up or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But it's just another part of the design. And I think, again, the attention to detail in this film is really good. I find, like Halloween Ends, which I think, by the way, this is a much better film than Halloween Ends. But like Halloween Ends, I think a lot of care went into this. I don't think this is a by the numbers reboot at all, especially given how long it's taken to come out. They've sort of talk of, will be a remake, there'll be a remake, there'll be a remake. And all of us are kind of thinking, I really don't want to see a remake. So I was glad that it wasn't a remake. I think it seemed like David Bruckner really cared about the material. And while I have problems with the way it was written, I would like to see him come back for another one. I would like to see. Yes. And hopefully the next one will be at the cinema as well. In fact, actually, before we come on to a relevant list, why don't we give our star ratings for this one? I am torn. I am between a 3 and a 3.5 for it. I sort of want to give it 3.5, and you know what? Yeah, I think I will go with 3.5. Just somewhere, either one. Depends how pissed off I am on the day if someone asks me. What about yourself, Jim? What are you thinking?
I'm going to give it a 4. I really enjoyed it. The first time, I was a little unsure of where we were going to go with it and if it was going to be any good, but it surprised me. And on a rewatch, it reinforced it for me that it is as good as that. And I think it stands among the originals as one of the better Hellraiser films. So yeah, 4 stars for me.
In terms of the ranking for it, I'm not going to reiterate the top 11 of these or anything like that. But what I would say is, for me, the stronger ones are the first 3.
Yeah.
And possibly Judgment. I think with Judgment, the second half of this was stronger than the second half of Judgment. But I thought Judgment probably had slightly more interest in universe building, and the first half of Judgment was stronger than the first half of this. So, it's around about the same level of quality as Judgment, and that's a good thing, So it's upper half, definitely. And Alasdair, what about yourself? Where does this rank for you? How many stars would you give it as well?
I'm going to go with the 3.5. The main human characters who we spend our time with needed to be a bit better, like written, a bit more engaging. The Nora character she is really sort of a nothing burger until her death. And Trevor, I mean, was any of us surprised when he turned out to be a villain? Film certainly got its strengths, and one of those strengths is like the lore in this is fantastic. It's like if you're to tell me every single creative decision they made lore-wise, all of it's a big thumbs up and a green tick. As I say, the strength of a Hellraiser film often probably hangs counterintuitively on the human characters, and they weren't just quite as good as I really would have liked. And I mean, I think I would say the original Hellraiser is that 5-star film for me out of the entire franchise. And for this one, yeah, it's going to be a 3.5, but it's a good 3.5. I did thoroughly enjoy this film.
We're going to be finishing off, as we always do in every episode since episode 2. We're going to be finishing up with a list. So today's list is coming from Screen Rant again, but the list is based around Rotten Tomatoes. So this is the 10 best horror reboots ranked according to Rotten Tomatoes. Now, I want to specify what seems to be a rule here. For the film to be a reboot, it's got to be a hard reboot, so it can't acknowledge any of the rest of the continuity. As such, Halloween 2018 is not on this list. The Rob Zombie one's not on the list either, which is quite interesting because it was actually it was a complete reboot. But so it was too shit for this list maybe. So there's 10 films on here. All of them were hard reboots. So no references to previous movies at all.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street is on there. Do you reckon it's high on the list or low on the list?
Low.
Yes, it's number 10 with 14%.
Fantastic. Oh, man.
Well, going with iconic slashers, Friday the 13th.
Yes, Friday the 13th is number 9. What do you reckon its freshness rating is?
The previous one was 14.
Yeah.
15?
It's 25%. You guys ever see the Friday the 13th remake?
Yes, and if you could ask me to recount anything that happened in it, I couldn't.
Oh, something that's quite fun. The whole bit of the beginning where Jason's defending his pot field was almost admirably weird. And I hated Jason coming back as like a Bear Grylls style character, like where he's like a sort of like a hunter and things now. He struck me as too smart. He's able to set up traps and things. It just didn't feel very Jason-y. It's a great
comment on Bear Grylls. That cannot possibly be his real name.
It's a great bit where go Google in the background and find out. It's a great bit where you see Jason with this. We're in his house and we see the statue for archery. So when Jason was like an archery champion, and then you see him taking a shot immediately afterwards and getting someone. That's like fantastic.
That's your setup and payoff.
Bear Grylls, his real name, by the way, is Edward Michael Grills.
See, the Grills, that's real.
Yeah, Grills. I mean, the bear certainly would be.
Color me confused. I'm just surprised either of it was real, to be honest.
I imagine you see people like Jim Henderson. So, next up, in fact, actually, before we go first to start doing a thing of giving little clues, what other ones do you think are going to be there? What other reboots have there been?
I was going to say the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes, we have a 2003 version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so that remake.
Yeah, I'm guessing these are all franchises.
Yeah,
to constitute as reboots.
It's worth mentioning, actually, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it occurs to me that all 3 of the most recent ones have acknowledged the original, which the remake didn't, because Leatherface was a prequel, Texas Chainsaw was a sequel, and the most recent one was also a sequel. What was the most recent one even called? Anyway, yeah, what else do you reckon's on there?
See, I'm wondering if there's
think we've
the
covered all
line
the
between
basics.
remake and reboot. That's the thing, because there's plenty of 80s slasher remakes out there, like April Fool's Day, My Bloody Valentine.
I will say all of these have had several sequels.
Okay.
Or like the original series has had several sequels.
Yeah. And Halloween's not on there.
Halloween's not on there, no.
Surprising. Alien?
Alien's not on there. Oh, Alien's never had a reboot.
No, it was prequels, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's
Just because we've literally just done the Hellraiser, is that on there?
it isn't. No.
Just thought I'd check that in case this is a trick question.
Give you guys some clues. So for the next one
Okay.
up on 29%, clue is they're here.
Poltergeist.
Oh,
Yeah, Poltergeist is
Yeah.
on there. I've never seen any of the Poltergeist sequels. I've seen the original one and I've seen the remake. Never seen the sequels.
I think I've seen the third one, but years and years and years ago, like when I was a kid. So I've got a very vague recollection of it.
Next one is on 30%. It's a reboot of a found footage franchise. Came out last year and it's a part 7.
Paranormal Activity?
Yes. So this is
Really?
the
Wow.
Paranormal Activity, the next of kin. Now, at the time when
I
it was
thought that
coming
was
out,
part of the series.
no, it's not got any. It's not got any official links to the rest of the series. At the time it was coming out, like it wasn't very well publicized or anything. It was almost quite strange considering how big a property that was at one point. And then when it did come out, like it doesn't really use the found footage in a particularly meaningful way. You know, it doesn't barely feels like a Paranormal Activity film. But yeah, that was the next one.
There's a few points in that film where like the camera gets knocked out or shuts off, and then it will get filmed like a regular movie until the camera gets turned back on again. So it's
Cheating a bit.
just defies just defies the found footage format a bit there.
Next one. This is a one on 30% as well. This is based upon a computer game, and it came
Resident
back.
Evil.
Yes, this is Resident Evil. Welcome to Raccoon City. I completely forgot that was a film.
I liked it, I think. I think I appreciated it more than I liked it, because that was the Resident Evil film we all wanted, but it came out about 20 years too late because everyone has played Resident Evil, seen the films, played the remakes. So by the time that film came along, it's like, well, yeah, we've seen this story a million times over already.
I think that's a very good point. Like, so, see, the Paul W.S. Anderson film series, it just became its own thing that was completely not connected to the games at all. But I think the very first one that he did, I did enjoy that one. And I think it's the best of the series. But that was when he was trying to do a Resident Evil film as opposed to whatever the hell he wanted to do.
I honestly do enjoy all of them. I know they're all crap, but it's fun craps.
There comes a point when, right, we've got the apocalypse. Humanity's been wiped out. Umbrella, the T-virus. Why are you still researching the T-virus? And even if you make the product that you want to make, who are you going to sell this to? I want to be a fly on the wall for some of their business meetings.
Yeah, because especially the final film, where it's literally just like 5 people left.
It'll be like Elon Musk after everyone's left Twitter. We're all going to
be on Mars
or whatever. Like, we're like, Musk, can you just like stop this? He's like, no, I'll make it big again.
Musk will be on Mars,
people
engaging in
laughing
Twitter
yet?
arguments with himself.
You'll be trolling himself. Next up, we mentioned Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That comes next, 37%. Then we have a big jump up. This one gets 63%. This is a reboot from the year 2019. It was unexpectedly good. I am a big fan of this one. What am I talking about?
I am completely drawing a blank.
I've defended this one on this very podcast a couple of times in passing, and I will at some point make us do an episode on it. I'll give you a clue. It watches a little bit like a Black Mirror episode. It has Mark Hamill appearing in it. and it's about a killer doll.
Chucky.
Yes,
Chucky.
Child's Play.
Child's Play, the remake. I thought that was a great film, and I'm glad to see it being honoured on this list. Next up, this was a sequel from last year. It's the 7th entry, I believe, in the franchise. Of obviously, it's not 7th entry; it's the 7th one, which is now the reboot. And it was also kind of unexpectedly good. The original one, think of like a kind of shitter version of Deliverance.
Anaconda.
It's taking place in the foresty area. We've got a cult. So you could say that when they went there, they went off the beaten track in a way that was erroneous. Yes, it's a wrong turn.
I was going to mention that one actually because I know there's. I've only seen the first one and that was shit. So God knows how it got this many sequels and a reboot.
Is Eliza Dushku in that one?
Yes, she is. The original one was all right. With that franchise, there's a bit of an like the odd numbered one. The even numbered ones are quite good. 2, 4, and 6 are all quite good. I remember being at the world premiere of number 6 at Fright Fest. We were interviewing the lead actor about it, going, so, you're joining this established franchise. You're like, established franchise, get over yourself, mate. Like, did you feel intimidated or what? Like, I like what you mean. But he goes, yeah, Wrong Turn films are quite good. I'd seen some of them. Like,
He's honest.
Yeah, like, you just think to yourself, mate, you've been cast in part 6 of an ongoing franchise. Just lie and say we saw the first 5 and you were a fan.
Doing it. He's not doing this for his big break. He's doing this just to add something to his portfolio.
Aye. I'll say the one with Doug Bradley, number 5, is probably the single worst entry in the series. And this one was quite good, to be fair. Like, it's currently sitting there on 65% fresh. Fine. Cool. I'll go with that. I don't think it's as good as a Child's Play remake, but it's certainly a decent watch. Next one, 74%. So I think Rotten Tomatoes is 70% plus is fresh, isn't it? And this one is this number 2 here. This is a quite fun comedic take on a franchise which James Cameron started learning his craft on.
Piranha?
Yes. It says Piranha 3D.
Really?
I was not expecting that to be on this list.
No.
Wait till we see
let
what wins
alone
it.
above Child's Play.
The thing with the Child's Play remake, I think it was a better film than Piranha 3D. But what I will say,
definitely.
What I would say with Piranha 3D is like it was so unashamed of what it was. Like it was just here's essentially a comedy film. We've got scantily clad people or in wearing nothing as well. We've got lots of fish, and it was designed for 3D, so we've got lots of stuff coming up the screen. And,
is that the one where someone gets their dick bit off and then you see the piranhas fighting over it in the water?
And we're like, here's Christopher Lloyd, I believe, appears in it. I never saw of Piranha's Free Double D, which is a great name for a sequel, but.
It calibrates your expectations perfectly. Let's be honest here. You're not. This is not high art.
If a one that wins it, to be honest, I don't think this is one that you would necessarily get because we tend to regard reboots and new continuities as being quite a modern thing. So this is going back to think about a famous franchise which a different studio took up and made their own. This came out in 1958.
I wasn't around back then.
Think of this.
Dracula?
Yes. This is the horror of Dracula from 1958. So that is what wins it. That, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is the greatest horror reboot.
Fair enough. I do feel like they've taken the term reboot a little generously there because I would see that as completely restarting a franchise, and some of these are definitely more sequels than or remakes, should I say?
Remake,
yeah,
rather than a reboot. But definitely an interesting list, and I could say I probably wouldn't want to watch half of them, but
Well, folks, thank you very much for joining us again. I think the next one we're going to do is going to be another Star Trek one. So, looking forward to seeing this search for Spock. Will they find him? What cliffhanger! And also the voyage home, the one of the whales. So do check out Horror Cult Films presents Star Trek, and if you haven't already, we're going back there next time. Until then, we all wish you a fond farewell and good night. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
For news, views, and reviews, check out horrorcultfilms.co.uk. Music by White Bat Audio.